The bay is black. I cannot see anything beyond the pools of illumination from the lights that line the prom in a great arc. The empty beach and a mere hint of the surf beyond. It is like staring close up at a pair of heavy black velvet curtains. Ooh, let's go inside, have a cup of tea, and I'll tell you what all this reminds me of. Hello, I'm Peter John Cooper. Today's tale takes us right out beyond the cliff edge, beyond the horizon, right out into the depths of night itself. Space. As well as being big, space is generally very, very empty. But the captain tends to keep the front searchlights on in the remote case anything happens along to liven up the deep blackness. Anything to give off-duty crew members something to do apart from whinging about their empty stomachs. And I will repeat here, that was not my fault. But as I say, looking out for something, anything, not that there ever is. Has it happened today? There was. But a dead body in full view of the command deck. What's more, in the disposal process, someone had left the helmet visor up. I mean, it's just basic decency. As well as being somewhere in an appendix covering death in space, corpses disposal of in the handbook. Close the eyes and close the visor. Common decency. Young pilots these days probably never even read the appendix, always believing it would never happen to them. So, there was this body hanging upside down in the void right in front of us and rotating slowly so that every few minutes its face, frozen in a rictus of mummification, seemed for all the worlds as though it was grinning at us, round and round again, like a preposterous, petrified pulsar. At least that solved the problem of lunch, because for once everybody had suddenly lost their appetites. Even though the captain turned the searchlights off, everybody still knew what was out there. Space, we are constantly reminded by the old recruiting posters, is not necessarily as dangerous as it once was. But for us old hands, there are still a million ways of getting to meet your maker face to face.
Mayday!
Generally, the most popular is still floating off while calling desperately to your crewmates until your oxygen runs out, as the rest of us reach for the radio off button. And I guess that's what happened here. Still, he could have had the decency to close his visor before being whisked off by your friendly neighbourhood space angels. And what do you do when one of your colleagues takes it upon him or herself to breathe their last on board? Actually here in the sick bay or somewhere, from food poisoning, say. Not that that's ever happened to me. Well, not often. We all know that the official practice is to place the body in his or her spacesuit, close the visor, bundle it into the airlock with as much dignity as possible before shooting the cadaver off on a trajectory as far away as possible. And if one of the crew can manage something solemn sounding on some sort of improvised musical instrument, so much the better. Or worse, deep space explorers are not generally known for their musicianship, generally limiting themselves to the harmonica or drumming with their fingers on the flight console for months on end, drumming, keep the old fires burning. Still, I have to thank God I've never had to share a trip with an accordionist or a Scotsman with a set of bagpipes. But as we all know, space is not the sort of place where practice follows theory over much. For a start, spacesuits are very expensive, and even if they've been tailor-made for an individual, as they used to be in the early days, no captain worth his or her salt is going to chuck away several million credits worth of kit. There have been tales of skippers who have just lashed the thing, the corpse or cadaver, whatever you like to call it, alongside. In that way, it might prove useful as a ship's fender in event of docking manoeuvres. In this case today, our first instinct was, as with all mishaps in space, to ignore it and see if it would go away of its own accord. We knew it wouldn't, of course. Without any form of propulsion, it would find the microgravity created by our ship enough to keep it on our trajectory from now on. What's more, we had more pressing matters to attend to. 6 months out with a Dutch captain who had been too drunk to check the ship's manifest properly and had signed for 12 pallets of gin and 6 tins of corned beef instead of 6 bottles and 12 pallets of supplies. And when it would take at least a year before our orbit took us anywhere remotely near a replenishment cache, we had been on short rations, very short rations, and tempers were becoming even shorter. So the cadaver stayed bumping along outside, and we all pretended it wasn't there. But after a few days, the crew was beginning to get spooked. I don't know why. We could clearly see this was a very ancient stiff and wasn't going to harm us at all, but somehow it gave a rather unpleasant reminder of our own mortalities. So somebody was going to have to do something about it. And that somebody seemed to be me. Get suited up and get out there, Cookie. growled the captain. Me? Yeah, you. But I'm not an engineer. I don't do extra vehicular stuff. Well, you thought today it's Cook's turn. He gave me one of his looks. Well, okay, what do you want me to do? Bring it back inside. What? Yeah, Horta, you heard. Well, I'm a chef, highly qualified and renowned for my culinary skills, but I don't go out for that sort of space heroics that other people seem to enjoy. Anyway, being a chef left me with a lot of time on my hands these days, and people always seem to think that the ration thing was somehow my fault, so I thought a walk out there in fresh space might prove to be a bit of a change. At least I'd lost quite a bit of weight lately in line with everyone else, so getting into the suit wasn't quite the issue it had been in the past. Everybody seemed to be willing to help, and there was a lot of helpful pushing to get me into the airlock. It did occur to me at one point that by shoving me out there would be one less mouth to share with. But the first thing I told them when I was space-side was that I had the keys to the kitchen and the stores of what little food we had firmly attached to my wrist. And I made sure that my tether was very firmly locked on. I don't know if you've ever wrestled with a stiff in a spacesuit in deep space. No, you probably haven't. Not many have. And me being a bit short on the Newtonian physics meant that all I could do was to put my arms round it and try and haul myself back to the hatch. We spiralled over and over in front of the view screen, twirling and spinning in some mad dance. The crew were now being less than sympathetic. I could hear guffaws coming over from the headset. Somebody dug out an old music file of Strauss waltzes as we orbited back towards the door. I never knew who the corpse was or had been. There was a name patch with indistinct lettering that might have said Dr. Frank Poole or something. But over the couple of hours we were crashing into the side of the ship, I reckon we got to know each other as well as anyone could in the circumstances. I have never spent so much time looking deep into someone else's eyes. We might as well have been in love. Eventually, we both got into the airlock, and I was delighted that there were as many hands to help us out as there had been pushing me in there. I was knackered, and it took me a long time to get out of the suit. As I was lying breathless on the floor, the captain snatched the kitchen keys from my wrist and made off with a couple of the crew and the corpse. Weak from dancing and hunger, I completely forgot about dinner. And when I tried to struggle up off the deck, the captain appeared more jovial than he'd been for many months past. "Don't worry, Cookie," he said, "you've done enough today. Ik zal het koken vanavond." I do the dinner tonight. And I was happy to let him get on with it. And for once, the meal seemed to go round quite nicely. Yeah, it captain was as good a cook as I was. Well, whatever happened to Paul, or whoever it was, I never gathered. Not my problem, really. The rations, though, seemed to stretch out better than I'd anticipated, and by the time we reached the supply dump, most of us had even put on a little weight. And the captain was more than delighted with the empty, antique spacesuit he liked to show off to visitors when we got back to Earth.